All right, let's get started. So I have a new empty, well, it's not quite empty, but an untouched Create React app. The only thing I've changed is I added in the images into the source directory that we'll be using. But you can just use any images you want. You can use images hosted on some website. It doesn't matter. In this video, I want to talk about getting Bootstrap set up, since that's not something we've really talked about yet. There are a couple of options. First, I guess I should do a quick 30-second primer for those of you who are not super familiar with Bootstrap. It is a really popular, apparently the most popular, world's most popular front-end component library. It's just a CSS and a JavaScript file at its bare minimum, and it gives you a bunch of classes that you add on to your components or add on to your HTML. If we go to documentation, if you look at something like, let's look at a navbar. So I believe that is in components. Navbar. Here we go. So here are some examples. You just add a bunch of class names. The markup gets a little bit cluttered, or more than a little in the case of a navbar, but this is much easier than trying to create your own responsive navbar from scratch. To get things like the drop-down or the hamburger menu like we have right here, where it turns into a slider. Anyway, so that's a lot of work to do that on your own. So some people like to use Bootstrap. And there are many other really common CSS frameworks out there. There's one we'll work with called Material UI in our final project. But my point here is that there is more than one way of incorporating something like Bootstrap into a React app. One option is to use a package like React Strap, which is made just for React components. It's actually pre-made React components skinned with Bootstrap, so you don't have to add a bunch of classes yourself. For example, if you want to make a Bootstrap button, which you would do normally without React or without React Strap by doing these classes, it's not much code, honestly, it's pretty easy. If you do it in React Strap, it is a button component that you import, and it has most of the things, most of the styles already set up. You just configure the color. Now that's a simple example, but things like navbars are quite easy to use quite easy to make if you're using React Strap. But I'm not going to show it right now. Instead, we're going to manually install Bootstrap using npm and include the files we need in all dependencies. And I'm doing that because I want to show you both ways, and we'll see how to use the Material UI component library, very similar to React Strap, pre-styled components, when we do our final project. So you'll have an example of both. So let's begin. The first thing we're going to do is install Bootstrap, not React Strap. If you want to go that route, you absolutely can. Here's my terminal. I'm going to npm install, well, while I'm here, let's do React Router DOM, just so I don't have to keep installing things, and Bootstrap. And we'll take a moment, and I'll be back when it finishes. Okay, so that finished up, and I want to call your attention to these two lines here. Warnings. Bootstrap requires a peer of jQuery, but none is installed. Also, another library called popper.js. And if we went to bootstrap.com, somewhere on the documentation, they talk about the dependencies right here. If you notice, you include jQuery if you're using just manual script tags with CDNs, jQuery, and then popper.js, and then Bootstrap down at the bottom, which is currently obstructed by this little slider bar. So we need those, and if we try and import Bootstrap on its own, which we'll begin with, inside of our index.js, we'll just do import Bootstrap. And it's in our node modules directory, so we don't need to do /. I restarted my server, and you'll see we get this error. Module not found can't resolve jQuery, and it's coming from the bootstrap.js file. So we need to make sure we install those two dependencies along with it. So npm install -- save jQuery and then popper.js. I always think it's popper-js or just popper. It is .js. Okay, so when those are finished, we'll have everything we need. Okay, so I restarted the server. Let's test it out, make sure Bootstrap is working. So inside of my app.js, I won't bother with another component. We'll begin by making a simple h1, and there's a class in Bootstrap called display-1. There's multiple displays, display 1, 2, 3, and 4. But this will just give us some large text, and we'll know that it's working, that Bootstrap is working, if it looks large and styled, and we'll just have the title be dog app for now. And it is not working. So this is just our regular Create React App styles from the app.js. We're not getting display 1, which should be much larger. And what's happening is that even though we've imported Bootstrap, this is actually just the JavaScript file for Bootstrap. We need to import the CSS as well, and this is kind of annoying, the line we have to type, but it's in that Bootstrap directory /dist/css/bootstrap.min.css. And you can find it if you wanted to actually look at it inside of node modules. Scroll all the way down, find Bootstrap, BOO, where are you? And then dist, then CSS, and then here's the file itself right there. So that's what we need to include. This does not include it automatically for us. Now, if we save, we go back to our browser, we can see we're getting the Bootstrap styles. So let's also make sure that we're getting the JavaScript. I mean, we don't have any errors. We probably would if that file wasn't found, but let's add in some Bootstrap like a simple navbar, which uses both CSS and JavaScript. So I'll go back to components, scroll down to navbar, and for now, I'll just steal one of these. We will be creating our own and styling it. I guess I can just click the copy button. Now let's come into our app.js, and just at the very top, above everything else, well, actually that's going to be a problem because we need to make sure that we're only returning one thing. So I'll just do a div like this and then put my navbar that I just copied and pasted right there. And I think we're going to run into an error because this input is unclosed. Remember, in React, we need to make sure to close those. Okay, now everything is working and we're getting a navbar. We're going to change this later on, but it's up here. And you can see that it should collapse and turn into this JavaScript-powered drop-down slider. So we won't be able to get this to work if we don't have Bootstrap, JavaScript, and CSS correctly installed. So that's done. Next, well, in the next video, we'll work on adding some routes and some content and creating our own components. Okay,